Humble garbage. Man helped an old man every morning until his lawyers arrived with 5 bodyguards. The rain hadn't stopped in 2 days. It was barely 5 in the morning when Caleb Foster turned the corner of West Highland Drive, his garbage truck humming against the soaked pavement of Queen Anne. The neighborhood was still asleep, windows dark, streets silent, except for one house, the old blue one with chipped paint and a sagging porch. There, like always, stood Mr. Leonard Whitmore, pale hands wrapped around a steaming mug. Waiting. Caleb killed the engine and stepped out. He didn't need to. Protocol didn't require him to leave the truck. But he did. Every single morning. Leonard didn't wave. He never had to. Caleb already knew. Without a word, he grabbed the trash bin from behind the fence and rolled it to the curb. Leonard, watching, gave a slight nod, almost imperceptible, as if to say, "Thank you," without actually saying it. Caleb responded the same way, a small tilt of the chin before turning back to his truck. But that morning, Leonard spoke. "You're earlier than usual," his voice dry and rusty, like a record long untouched. Caleb hesitated, then looked up, the drizzle sliding from the brim of his cap. "Storm slowed things down near Mercer. Figured I'd get ahead before traffic." Leonard nodded, sipping his coffee. He was wearing the same worn-out cardigan he always wore, the one with a tear near the shoulder. Caleb noticed, but didn't comment. Instead, he paused. Something about Leonard's face, the way his eyes lingered on the fog, felt heavier today. Sadder. "You okay?" Caleb asked, surprising even himself. He wasn't used to starting conversations. Leonard didn't answer immediately. Instead, he lowered his cup, looked straight at Caleb, and said, "You remind me of someone I used to know." Caleb raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, a man who showed up every morning, just like you. Didn't speak much, but he was always there when it mattered." Caleb didn't know what to say, so he just nodded and turned back to the truck. But before he reached the door, Leonard added quietly, "He died alone." The words hit him like cold air down the back of his neck. Later that day, as Caleb sat alone in the break room of the sanitation depot, sipping cheap coffee from a cracked mug, he kept thinking about Leonard, about the cardigan, the silence, the sadness in his voice. He didn't know why it stuck with him, but it did. He told himself it was just an old man being reflective. He didn't know that within weeks everything would change, and that this quiet ritual, one man helping another with trash, was the beginning of a story far deeper than he ever imagined. Before we go on, if this story has already pulled you in, don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. And tell me in the comments, what was the very first detail that grabbed your attention? I'm curious to see what you noticed. The next morning, Caleb arrived earlier than usual. The storm had cleared, leaving Queen Anne wrapped in a blanket of damp silence. The streets glistened under the haze of the first light, and birds dared to sing again. He turned onto the familiar block, his truck's engine humming low as he slowed to a stop in front of the blue house. Leonard was there, as always, sitting on the porch with his coffee. But something was different. This time, the mug trembled slightly in his hand. His eyes, usually lost in the fog or the trees across the street, found Caleb's face and held it. "Good morning," Leonard called out before Caleb even stepped down. Caleb walked over slowly. "You sure you should be out in the cold?" "I've lived through wars." "This isn't cold," Leonard answered, lips tugging into a tired smile. Caleb gave a soft chuckle. "Fair enough." There was a pause as Caleb rolled the bin to the street, his boots crunching over wet leaves. Leonard broke the silence. How long have you been doing this? 5 years. Caleb didn't look up. 3 in Ballard, 2 here in Queen Anne. Before that? Caleb paused. He turned, resting his arm on the top of the bin. Why do you ask? Leonard shrugged. Because I see it in your shoulders, the way you carry weight that isn't there. Caleb's expression shifted, barely. A flicker of something old, something buried. You one of those old guys who reads people like books? He asked, attempting to keep it light. I used to be a psychologist, Leonard said gently. A lifetime ago. Caleb blinked. Really? World War II. After the war, I worked with veterans, then with families. Grief, loss, loneliness. Leonard took a slow sip of his coffee. Turns out, none of those things go out of style. Caleb sat down on the bottom step of the porch without asking. Leonard didn't protest. The two sat in silence for a long minute. It wasn't awkward. It was something else, like a still lake holding secrets just beneath its surface. You got kids? Leonard asked suddenly. Caleb shifted his weight. A daughter, he said after a beat. Emma, she's 10. Where is she? With her mom. Leonard nodded slowly. You see her often? Another pause. No. That was all Caleb said. Just one word, heavy like a dropped hammer. Leonard didn't ask why. Instead, he leaned back in his old wooden chair, which creaked like it might give up any second, and said softly, I had a daughter once. Caleb glanced at him, waiting. She died in her 20s. Drunk driver. December 19th. Leonard's gaze drifted up toward the cloudy sky. I still set her place at Christmas. Caleb didn't know what to say. What could he say? I'm sorry, he managed. Leonard looked at him, eyes glistening. You know the worst part? People stop asking after a while. They stop talking about her. It's like she evaporated. He wiped at his eye quickly, pretending to scratch his cheek. Caleb swallowed hard. My daughter still asks about me sometimes, he said. At least, I hope she does. They sat like that for a while longer. 2 men, decades apart, with different pasts, but identical wounds. Neither knew that in that moment, something had shifted. Something unspoken had been exchanged. From then on, Caleb didn't just stop to help with the trash. He came back. At first, just for a few minutes after his shift. Then, on weekends, fixing little things around the yard. A cracked flower pot. A loose gutter. A broken stair step that Leonard never mentioned, but that Caleb noticed limping slightly on. One Sunday afternoon, as clouds rolled low over Seattle, Leonard stood in the backyard, staring at a broken section of fence. Caleb was kneeling nearby, tightening a bolt on an old wooden bench. Leonard cleared his throat. Would you mind helping me fix that fence? I'd pay you, of course. Caleb stood up, wiping his hands on his jeans. You don't have to pay me, he said. Just tell me where the hammer is. Leonard pointed to the small tool shed near the garden, and as Caleb walked toward it, he heard Leonard mutter behind him, just loud enough. Thank you, son. Caleb froze for a second. Not because of the thank you, because of the sun. He didn't say anything, just smiled quietly to himself and opened the shed door. Inside, it smelled like rust and rain and old memories. He had no idea that that shed, that simple, creaky door, was the beginning of a secret that would change everything. And Leonard? He wasn't just a lonely old man. He was holding something. And soon, it would no longer be his to keep. The days that followed blurred into a quiet routine. Caleb no longer waited for the weekends. After every morning shift, he'd return to Leonard's house. He brought groceries without being asked. replaced light bulbs, tightened leaky faucets. He didn't talk much while working, and Leonard didn't push. But little by little, a strange and honest companionship grew between them. One Thursday afternoon, a sharp breeze blew through Queen Anne. The sun tried to break through the overcast sky, but the clouds refused to move. Caleb had just finished repairing the broken section of the backyard fence. He wiped the sweat from his brow and noticed Leonard sitting at the garden table, a bottle of bourbon and 2 glasses beside him. "Done for the day?" Leonard asked, nodding toward the fence. "For now," Caleb said. "That thing won't fall again." "Good," Leonard replied. "Then sit. You've earned a drink." Caleb hesitated. He hadn't touched alcohol in years. But something about Leonard's eyes, that mix of gratitude and something deeper, made him take the offer. He sat down, his hands rough and calloused against the smooth glass Leonard slid toward him. They drank in silence for a few minutes. Then Leonard spoke. "You know, I was married for 41 years. Caleb looked over. Leonard's gaze had drifted to the flowers beyond the fence. She died 11 years ago. Lung cancer. Took her fast. Didn't even have time to scream. "I'm sorry," Caleb said sincerely. "She was everything good in my life," Leonard continued, voice lower now. She had this laugh, sounded like a wind chime caught in a storm. "I still wake up hearing it sometimes." He took another sip. "I used to think, after she died, that the world went quiet. But it didn't. I just stopped listening." Caleb sat quietly, glass untouched. "Why me?" he asked. Leonard blinked. "You've got family. You've got neighbors. You're a smart man. Why trust a stranger with all this?" Leonard turned to him, eyes sharp, like he was choosing his next words with care. "Because you didn't ask for anything," Leonard said. "You didn't knock on my door looking for help. You didn't see an old man and smell opportunity." He leaned forward slightly. "You came back, again and again, without reason, without a motive." Caleb looked away. That guilt again, the silent, heavy kind, started to surface. Leonard saw it. "Tell me something," he said. "What happened with your daughter?" Caleb froze. He hadn't spoken about it. Not to anyone. Not even to himself, really. "I made a mistake," he said finally, barely above a whisper. 5 years ago, I got in a fight. Drunk. Some guy insulted Emma's mom. I lost control. Ended up in jail for 8 months. Leonard said nothing, letting the words hang in the air like fog. "After that," Caleb continued, "she didn't want me near Emma. Said I was dangerous. Said I'd break her too." He gritted his teeth. "She's probably right." Leonard leaned back slowly, his face unreadable. "No," he said after a long moment. "She's not." Caleb scoffed. "You don't even know me." "I know pain," Leonard said. "And I know men who try to build something from the rubble of their own life. I've met hundreds. I've failed more than I helped. But I see something in you, Caleb." He pointed at him, finger trembling slightly. "You show up. You listen. You fix what you can, even if it's just broken fences and dripping faucets. That's who you are." Caleb's throat tightened. He looked down at the untouched glass, then back up. "She still doesn't talk to me," he said. "Emma. I send letters. She never replies." Leonard reached into his pocket, pulled out something wrapped in a faded napkin, and slid it across the table. Caleb unwrapped it. A small, old photograph. A black and white image of a little girl on a carousel. Leonard's daughter. "I used to write her letters too," Leonard said. "After she died. Never mailed them. Just needed to feel like I was still speaking to her. Caleb stared at the photo. Sometimes, Leonard whispered, we write for them, but really, we write for ourselves. The wind picked up. Leaves rustled across the yard. Neither of them spoke for a long time. That night, as Caleb walked back to his truck, he glanced up at the house. The lights were still on. Leonard stood by the window, one hand resting on the sill, watching him. There was something haunting in his silhouette. A man running out of time. And for the first time, Caleb felt afraid. Not for Leonard. For what would come after. Because something was changing. And he didn't know if he was ready. He didn't know that within days, Leonard would vanish. And that silence would come roaring back. The following Saturday morning, Caleb arrived at Leonard's house with a new box of tools in one hand and 2 paper cups of coffee in the other. One black, the way Leonard liked it, and one with cream and sugar for himself. The breeze had a bite to it. November was creeping in, and with it came that dull Seattle chill that seeped into bones and thoughts alike. But something felt off. The porch was empty. The old wooden chair where Leonard usually waited was still, the cushion slightly damp from the morning dew. No coffee cup in sight. No open door. No shadow behind the window curtain. Just stillness. Caleb stepped closer, pausing at the base of the steps. He scanned the porch, then knocked lightly on the frame. Leonard? Nothing. He tried again, louder this time. Hey, Leonard, I brought the coffee. Silence. Caleb stood there for a moment, unsure. It wasn't like him to worry right away. Leonard was old, sure, but he was tough, independent. But something twisted in Caleb's gut, a sensation he hadn't felt since the night he got the call about losing custody of Emma. He knocked again. Still nothing. He took a few cautious steps back and looked up at the second-story window. Closed. Curtains drawn. No movement. He waited. Another minute passed. Still no sign. Caleb set the coffee cups on the porch and walked back to his truck. Sat inside. Waited 10 minutes. Engine off. Hands gripping the steering wheel. Then he came back the next day. And the next. 3 mornings in a row. No Leonard. No creak of the porch boards. No gentle nod. No old cardigan. No whispered morning. Only silence. On the 4th day, something snapped inside him. He parked the truck, jumped out, and walked straight to the front door. Knocked once, hard. No answer. Then he tried the doorknob. To his surprise, it turned. The door creaked open slowly, revealing the dim, musty interior of the house. The smell of old books, faint dust, and time. "Leonard?" Caleb called, voice echoing slightly. No answer. He stepped inside. The living room looked untouched, furniture covered in faded crocheted blankets, walls lined with dusty bookshelves, and a fireplace filled with unburned wood. A faint draft whispered through a cracked window. He moved down the hallway. Every creak of the floorboards made his heart beat faster. The house felt like it had paused mid-breath, like it was holding something. "Leonard!" He tried again, this time softer, afraid of the answer. Then he saw it. The bedroom door, half open. And there, just inside, slumped on the floor beside the bed, was Leonard, pale, motionless, one hand clutching the blanket, the other limp against the carpet. "Shit!" Caleb whispered, rushing forward. "Leonard! Hey! Hey!" He dropped to his knees, checking for breath, for pulse. Anything. A faint wheeze. Barely there. But there. Leonard's eyes fluttered open, unfocused. "It's Caleb. I'm here, okay? I'm gonna get help." Leonard's lips parted, but no sound came. His skin was cold, his frame fragile beneath the layers of blankets and nightclothes. He looked smaller than Caleb had ever seen him. Caleb reached for his phone with shaking hands and called emergency services. He stayed there, kneeling beside Leonard, one hand gripping the old man's shoulder, whispering, "You're okay. You're gonna be okay. Stay with me." Minutes later, the sirens came. Red and blue lights danced across the old walls. Paramedics rushed in, asked questions Caleb couldn't answer. He watched them lift Leonard onto the stretcher, attach tubes and monitors. Then, as they started wheeling him out, Leonard grabbed Caleb's hand, weak, trembling, and held it tightly for just 1 second. "Don't let them take the house," he whispered, voice almost a breath. Then he passed out. Caleb rode in the ambulance. He sat at the edge of the hospital room as machines beeped and nurses moved around. He didn't know who to call. Leonard had no photos of family in the house, no names listed anywhere, just old journals, broken clocks, and fading memories. Hours passed. A doctor, middle-aged and tired, finally approached. "He's stable," she said, "but he can't be alone anymore. He's severely dehydrated, malnourished, and disoriented. We'll need to transfer him to long-term care." Caleb stared at her. "Can I talk to him?" The doctor shook her head. "Not tonight. He needs rest. Come back tomorrow." So he did. And again the next day. Leonard barely spoke, but when he did, he asked about the house. Asked if Caleb had found the papers. Caleb didn't know what that meant, but he promised to look. On the 4th day in the hospital, Leonard called him close. "There's a box," he said, voice hoarse. "Closet, back corner, lockbox, old files. You'll need them when I'm gone." Caleb shook his head. "You're not going anywhere." But Leonard just gave him that look again, the kind that said he knew better. "I was alone for too long," he whispered, "and then you showed up, every morning. Didn't even know what you were doing." Caleb's throat tightened. "I just wanted to help." Leonard smiled weakly. "And you did. More than you know." He squeezed Caleb's hand. "I'm tired," he said. And then he closed his eyes. That was the last full conversation they had. Leonard was moved to a private care facility the next day, and Caleb returned to the blue house, alone now. He stood in the doorway, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the wooden floor. He looked around at the place he'd come to know so well. The smell of old coffee, the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the antique wall clock. Then he walked down the hallway, past the photos, past the old piano, toward Leonard's room. He opened the closet door, and in the far back corner, under a stack of flannel shirts and a box of Christmas ornaments, he found the lockbox, heavy, dusty, locked tight. He turned it in his hands, heart pounding. Whatever was inside, it mattered. Because Leonard said so. And Caleb had made a promise. The lockbox was heavier than it looked. Caleb set it down on Leonard's kitchen table with a quiet thud, his calloused hands brushing the dust from its surface. It was old, maybe older than him, with tarnished brass corners and a stubborn lock that had clearly not been touched in years. No key in sight. He searched the room, drawers, cabinet tops, underneath placemats. He checked behind the old recipe books tucked beside the fridge. Nothing. Then he remembered something, a hollow space in the baseboard of Leonard's bedroom closet. He had seen it once while helping fix a loose floorboard, but didn't think much of it. He returned, flashlight in hand, got on his knees, and ran his fingers along the baseboard until they hit a small seam. A gentle push, and click. The panel popped out. Behind it, Wrapped in wax paper and tucked inside an old sock was a single brass key. He smiled, just for a second. Then he returned to the kitchen. With a deep breath, Caleb turned the key in the lock. It resisted. Then, click. The lid creaked open. Inside, folders. Dozens of them. Documents, handwritten letters, yellowing photographs, and envelopes sealed with wax. A thick file stamped with government insignia. Bank statements, old deeds, and at the very bottom, a handwritten note addressed in delicate cursive, to be opened only by Caleb Foster. His heart thudded. The air around him felt suddenly still. He took the envelope, sat down, and carefully opened it. Inside, a single-page letter written in Leonard's firm but slanted hand. Caleb, if you're reading this, it means I've either lost the strength to speak or the right moment never came. I don't know which is worse. I need you to understand something. You didn't just help me with the trash, or with the fence, or the small things. You brought something back into this house that had been gone for decades. Presence. Real, honest presence. That alone would have been enough. But there's more. Much more. I was not always the man you met. I spent the first half of my life as a shadow behind others. A silent partner in things that now feel like someone else's sins. Then I met Evelyn, my wife, and for a while, I was a better man. But she got sick, and after she passed, I vanished again, into silence, into shame, until you knocked. I have no children left, no siblings, no family to speak of, no one who ever truly saw me without judgment, except you. Everything I've built, saved, and hidden, it's yours now, and soon others will come to make sure of that. You'll want to run. You'll want to give it all back. But don't. You were the first person in a long time to show up without a mask. Don't start wearing one now. Use what I've left you. Do with it what I no longer can. Help others like you helped me. And if you're wondering if I ever thought of you as a son, I did. Every day. L. Whitmore. Caleb stared at the letter, unmoving. His throat felt like it had closed. He read it again. Then a third time. He didn't know how long he sat there. Outside, the afternoon rain had returned, pattering against the window. The house felt smaller now, fuller, haunted, not by ghosts, but by a kind of love he hadn't expected. A kind of trust that felt too big for him. He looked back at the box. Inside one folder was a thick document titled, Last Will and Testament of Leonard A. Whitmore. His eyes scanned the first paragraph. I, Leonard Arthur Whitmore, being of sound mind and memory, do hereby bequeath the entirety of my estate, including all assets, property, financial holdings, and personal belongings, to Mr. Caleb J. Foster. He exhaled. Hard. A bank document clipped to the folder showed numbers. Too many zeros to comprehend at once. Then came deeds. The house, yes, but also shares in a now-defunct tech company that had apparently been quietly acquired by a major firm. Caleb recognized the logo. It was the kind of stock that sat dormant for years and then exploded. There were signed stock transfer documents, access credentials to financial accounts, passwords written on paper, no digital traces. Everything had been prepared. Everything. He stood up suddenly, pacing. He couldn't breathe. This couldn't be real. He was a garbage man. An ex-con. A guy who still made minimum wage and shared a room in a 2-bedroom apartment in Northgate. He didn't even have a credit card. And now, he had more money than anyone in his entire bloodline ever dreamed of? He gripped the edge of the counter, knuckles white. I don't deserve this, he muttered aloud. And then, as if summoned by the universe itself, the knock. 3 sharp raps at the front door. Caleb stiffened. He walked toward the door slowly, adrenaline rising like a wave. Outside, parked on the curb, was a long black limousine. He opened the door. Standing there were 2 sharply dressed men in black suits. Lawyers, from the look of them. Behind them, by the gate, 5 large men in black jackets stood in formation. Bodyguards. One of the lawyers stepped forward. "Mr. Caleb Foster," he asked, voice polished and firm. Caleb hesitated. "Yeah?" The man extended a hand. "I'm Benjamin Carr. I represent the estate of Mr. Leonard Whitmore. May we come in?" Caleb stepped back automatically, still stunned. The men entered. Their footsteps echoed on the wood floor. One of the bodyguards stayed outside, eyes scanning the street. Mr. Carr surveyed the room like a man confirming blueprints. "I assume you've found the documents," he said, eyeing the open lockbox. Caleb nodded, not trusting himself to speak. "Then I imagine you have questions," Carr continued, placing a black leather briefcase on the table. Caleb blinked. "What? What is all this?" Carr looked him in the eye. "Mr. Whitmore made several investments decades ago under anonymous holdings. His estate has been dormant by design. He lived off a modest pension, hid the rest, and instructed us, should anything happen to him, to transfer all assets to the beneficiary he named in his final will." Caleb swallowed hard. "But why me?" Carr smiled faintly. "He trusted you." Then he opened the briefcase. Inside, contracts, notarized copies, transfer forms, deeds, account summaries, and on top of it all, a document titled Foundation Planning, the Whitmore Project, proposed by Caleb J. Foster. Caleb stared at it, stunned. "I didn't write that," Carr nodded. "Mr. Whitmore did, based on your conversations, your actions, your habits. He said you were the kind of man who could change lives, if given the chance." Caleb felt the weight of it all slam into his chest like a freight train. This was more than money. It was purpose. It was trust. And he wasn't ready. Or maybe, just maybe he was. He looked back at Carr. "What happens now?" he asked, voice quiet. Carr straightened his tie. "Now, Mr. Foster, everything changes." The day after the lawyers came, Caleb didn't go to work. He sat in Leonard's old armchair, the one by the window that creaked when you leaned too far left. A cup of cold coffee sat untouched in his hand. Outside, Queen Anne bustled quietly. Joggers passed with earbuds in, a kid walked a golden retriever, neighbors trimmed hedges. Just another peaceful Seattle morning. But inside that house, nothing felt normal anymore. Everything had shifted. His name was now tied to accounts with more zeros than he'd ever seen. There were official calls coming in, emails from banks, requests for documents, meetings with estate managers, and then the news broke. It started with a headline on a local digital paper. "Seattle Garbage Man Inherits Millions from Mysterious Retiree." The article didn't say much, just that Caleb Foster, sanitation worker, had been named the sole heir to Leonard A. Whitmore's estate, which included a property in Queen Anne and substantial financial holdings. But that was enough. The next morning, there were cameras. A local news van parked across the street. Reporters hovered by the sidewalk, waiting for a glimpse. Neighbors peeked from their windows. Some waved awkwardly. Others just stared. Caleb didn't come out. Not until the knocks came again. This time at the back door. He opened it to find a man he hadn't seen in over 5 years. Caleb, the man said, smiling slightly. Still hate neckties? Caleb blinked. Jorge Vasquez had been his supervisor back in Ballard, back before everything fell apart. He was the one who vouched for Caleb to get rehired after his release from prison. What are you doing here? Caleb asked, stepping aside. Jorge entered slowly, glancing around. Saw the news. Wasn't sure if it was the same Caleb Foster. But here we are. Caleb ran a hand over his face. Yeah, it's been a weird week. Jorge nodded. You okay? I don't know. I haven't had time to feel anything. He gestured toward the table, now stacked with folders, post-its, and legal pads filled with Leonard's handwriting and his own notes scribbled over in frustration. Everyone keeps asking me what I'm going to do with it, Caleb said. I didn't even know this kind of money existed outside movies. Jorge sat down. You don't have to decide right away, but you should know people are talking. Caleb stiffened. Talking? Rumors that you manipulated Leonard, took advantage of him. Some of the guys at the depot think the whole thing's a scam. Caleb leaned back in the chair, jaw tight. Of course they do. They just don't understand. Hell, I barely do, Jorge said, looking him in the eye. But I know you, Caleb. You don't lie. You don't steal. You work. You show up. Not always, Caleb muttered. Jorge sighed. We all fall, brother. What matters is what you build after. That line, it echoed. Men fall too, Caleb. What defines them is how they get back up. Leonard's words, sharp, unshakable. Jorge stood up, placing a hand on Caleb's shoulder. You don't owe anyone an explanation. But if you want people to see the truth, maybe don't hide inside forever. That night, Caleb sat in the dim kitchen, Leonard's letter in front of him. His hands traced the edges of the paper, over and over, like it might disappear if he looked away. He was so lost in thought, he didn't hear the front gate open, but he heard the voice, soft, feminine, familiar. Dad? He turned. There she was, Emma, not in a photo, not a memory, real, standing in the hallway, holding a purple backpack and a sweatshirt too big for her. She was taller than he remembered, her hair longer, pulled into a ponytail. She looked like her mother, but her eyes were his, wide, searching. Emma! His voice cracked. She didn't move, just stood there, awkward and frozen. I saw you on the news, she said. Caleb stepped forward, but stopped himself. How did you get here? Mom's boyfriend works in media. She was talking about it, about you. I found the address online. She pulled out her phone, showed him. An article. A photo of the house. Emma, your mom. She doesn't know I came, she said quickly. She would have said no, but I wanted to see you. Caleb's heart was pounding. He didn't know what to do. Hug her? Cry? Apologize? It felt like trying to walk through fog. She stepped forward. This house, it's nice. Weird, but nice. You live here now? He nodded. I guess I do. Is it true? She asked. The money and everything? He looked down. It is. I still don't understand why. Emma bit her lip, then looked around. Her eyes landed on the armchair by the window, the photo of Leonard on the table beside it, the empty coffee mug. Was he your friend? Caleb nodded. Yeah, he was. She sat down on the bottom step of the staircase, tucking her knees to her chest. They stayed like that for a long time, not speaking, just breathing the same air again after years apart. Then she looked up. Do you still write letters? Caleb froze. She looked away, shy now. I found them. In the attic. The ones you sent me. Mom never gave them to me. I read every single one. A lump caught in his throat. You did? Emma nodded. The one about the swing set? That one made me cry. He blinked fast, trying to keep it together. I'm sorry, Em, he said, for everything. She didn't respond, just stood up, walked over, and, without warning, hugged him. Tight. Caleb broke. Silent tears slipped down his face as he wrapped his arms around his daughter for the first time in 5 years. And in that moment, all the inheritance in the world meant nothing compared to the small, fragile weight of forgiveness in his arms. Later that night, after Emma had gone, promising to come back, Caleb sat in Leonard's chair again. But now, the silence didn't feel so heavy, because for the first time in years, he wasn't alone. And tomorrow, he'd make a choice. Not about the money, but about what kind of man he was going to be now. It was a gray Monday when Caleb made the decision. Not because something extraordinary happened that day, but because nothing did. The kind of nothing that made a man realize he couldn't just sit with everything Leonard had left him. Money wasn't purpose, and it sure as hell wasn't peace. He stood in the middle of Leonard's living room, a place that still smelled like pipe tobacco and old furniture polish, and looked around. The photos, the journals, the empty coffee mug left untouched on the table. Leonard's memory wasn't just a feeling now. It was a weight. One that Caleb refused to let turn into regret. He opened a blank notebook and wrote one line across the first page. The Whitmore Project. Home for the Forgotten. Then he got to work. 3 weeks later, Leonard's house looked nothing like it used to. Gone were the yellowing curtains and faded rugs. The walls had been freshly painted a soft, calming gray-blue. New furniture filled the rooms, all chosen for comfort. Old books remained. Leonard would have hated to see them go, but were reorganized into open shelves where anyone could grab one anytime. The piano was restored, tuned, ready. The idea had grown fast. A home. Not a shelter. Not a charity. A real home for elderly people with no one left. No family, no savings, no plan B. Just like Leonard. Caleb didn't want pity funding or government red tape. He had the money. And for once in his life, he had clarity. He also had people watching. Reporters kept circling. And though Caleb avoided interviews, his story had gone viral. Former co-workers stopped him on the street. Some were supportive, others were skeptical, but it wasn't until she showed up that everything began to shift again. It was a crisp afternoon when the black SUV pulled up in front of the house. Caleb was out back overseeing the delivery of new garden benches when he heard the car door shut. He walked around to the front, wiping his hands on his jeans. A woman stepped out. Elegant. Mid-40s. Dark navy suit. High heels that didn't seem to belong on this street. She had a leather briefcase in one hand and a manila folder in the other. "Mr. Foster?" she asked, her voice smooth and assertive. He nodded slowly. "Yeah. Can I help you?" "I'm Meredith Holloway. I'm with Whitmore and Key Associates." Caleb frowned. "Never heard of it." "You wouldn't have. It's a private investigative firm. Mr. Whitmore hired us almost a year ago." Caleb stiffened. "Investigative?" Meredith walked toward him, her steps calculated. "Yes. He asked us to look into your background before he added your name to his will." Caleb looked down, jaw tightening. "So you're here to tell me I'm not worthy?" he muttered. "No," she said. "I'm here to tell you he thought you were exactly the kind of person worthy of everything he left." That made him look up. Meredith handed him the manila folder. "He had us compile everything. Arrest records, employment history, Letters to your daughter. We traced your life like threads in a tapestry. Caleb opened the folder. Inside were copies of documents, his old booking photo, court transcripts, character references from his parole officer, work attendance logs, and, surprisingly, a scanned copy of one of the letters he'd sent to Emma. He flipped through, feeling exposed. He really dug deep. Meredith nodded. He didn't want to be wrong, but the more he learned, the more convinced he became. Of what? Caleb asked. She smiled softly, and for the first time, her lawyer-like exterior cracked just enough to let something human show. That he'd finally met someone who could carry what he couldn't anymore. Meredith looked around at the house, at the freshly planted flowers near the steps, the buzz of activity inside, volunteers painting, an elderly man with a cane being shown a guest room by a nurse. "You're doing it," she said. Caleb nodded, but his voice was low. "I still don't know if I'm the right guy." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "He told me once that legacy isn't about blood. It's about impact. You gave him dignity in his final days. That was more than most people ever gave him." She handed him one last envelope. This was meant to be delivered after the first resident moved in. Caleb hesitated, then opened it. Inside, a note, short, handwritten. "You're not a caretaker. You're a restorer. You fix things, Caleb. Fences, people, whatever's broken. That's your gift. Don't run from it. Build something bigger than both of us." His throat tightened. He folded the note, placed it gently back into the envelope, and slipped it into his pocket. When he looked up, Meredith was already turning back toward her car. Before she opened the door, she paused. "Oh, and Mr. Foster? Yeah? There's something else." She reached into her briefcase and pulled out another document. This came in from a tech firm in California. Apparently, Leonard's shares were part of a merger 2 weeks ago. "You're now the majority shareholder of Whitmore Analytics." Caleb blinked. "What does that even mean?" "It means," she said with a smirk, "you have influence now, power, and decisions to make." Then she got in the SUV and drove away, leaving Caleb standing on the front steps, surrounded by new beginnings and the overwhelming realization that Leonard had left him not just with money, but with responsibility. Later that evening, Caleb stood by the window, watching the sun set over Seattle's skyline. Inside, a nurse helped an elderly woman into her new room, a former bus driver from Everett, whose family had all passed. She had nowhere to go. Now she did. Emma was visiting again the next day. They were going to plant apple trees in the yard together, just like he'd once written about in a letter she never got. He touched the note in his pocket, breathing deeply. This wasn't the end of the story. Not even close. Because somewhere in the shadows, not everyone believed this was justice. And someone, somewhere, was watching. Waiting. The house had a new sound now. Laughter. It echoed faintly down the hallways, warm and genuine. Caleb stood in the foyer, watching as Mrs. Eileen Marsh, 83, arthritis in both knees, a memory full of poetry, slowly taught Emma how to knit. The girl sat cross-legged on the floor, brows furrowed in concentration, her tongue sticking out between her lips as the yarn slipped from her fingers. "Slower," Eileen said, chuckling. "You're stabbing the wool, dear, not saving it." "I am going slow," Emma protested. Caleb smiled from the doorway. These moments, they weren't loud. They weren't dramatic, but they were everything. And they were happening here, under this roof, in the house that once felt like a tomb. He turned away and headed for the office, now set up in what used to be Leonard's bedroom. He passed volunteers sorting linens, a retired chef setting up the communal kitchen, and a small group of elderly residents playing cards at the dining room table. The Whitmore project was alive and growing. But not everyone liked that. 3 days later, the storm hit. It wasn't wind or rain, it was a letter. A thick official envelope delivered by courier, hand-delivered, no return address. Caleb opened it alone in the office. Inside, a legal notice, a lawsuit. The estate of Richard A. Whitmore vs. Caleb Foster. He read it 3 times before the words made sense. According to the claim, Leonard Whitmore had a distant nephew, Richard, who now contested the will, arguing mental incapacity and undue influence. The suit alleged that Caleb manipulated an elderly man for financial gain, suggesting fraud, coercion, and even elder abuse. Caleb stared at the page, numb. He flipped to the second document, an official request for a court hearing. Attached was a photo, grainy, clearly taken from a news story, of Caleb standing on the porch, holding the lockbox. His hands began to shake. That night, after the house quieted, Caleb sat at the edge of Leonard's bed, reading the court documents over and over, as if one more reading might turn them into something else, something less real. Emma knocked softly and entered without waiting. "You okay?" she asked. He didn't answer, just handed her the papers. She sat beside him and read silently. When she finished, she looked up, eyes wide. "Who's Richard?" Caleb shook his head. "A nephew. One Leonard never talked about. Probably hasn't seen him in years." "Then why is he doing this?" Caleb swallowed hard. "Because he wants the money. Because people don't believe someone like me could be given all this without a catch." Emma stayed quiet. Then she looked him in the eye. "You didn't do anything wrong." "I was in prison, Em," he said, almost whispering. "I have a record. That's all a jury needs sometimes. One mistake, and people stop listening." She frowned. "You think Leonard didn't know that. I don't know what I think anymore." Emma stood, her small frame tense. "Well, I know, and I read his letters. I saw how he wrote about you. You didn't take anything from him, Dad. He gave it. All of it. Because you earned it." She left, angry now. Not at him, but at the world. Caleb sat there in the silence, the letter crumpling in his fist. The next morning, the press returned. Cameras, reporters, questions yelled from the gate. "Mr. Foster, did you coerce Leonard Whitmore? Is the inheritance legitimate? Are you afraid of losing everything?" He ignored them, but the residents didn't. Mrs. Marsh stopped eating. Mr. Hanley, a quiet war veteran, packed his bags without telling anyone. A volunteer called off, citing bad optics. The air inside the house turned cold, tense. Doubt crept in like mold. Caleb sat down with the residents after dinner. "I want you to know," he said, voice steady, "I didn't trick Leonard. I didn't ask for any of this. I just helped him carry the trash one day. That's how it started. And somehow, he saw something in me I didn't even see in myself." Some nodded. Others looked away. He added, quieter now, "But if any of you feel uncomfortable staying, I won't stop you. I'll even help you find somewhere else." A long silence followed. Then Mrs. Marsh stood. "You know what I remember?" she said. "The night I got here, you made me tea. Sat with me for 2 hours while I cried about my sister. I hadn't talked about her in a decade. No one cared to listen." She looked at the others. "This man listens, and I don't give a damn what anyone says on the news. I'm staying." One by one, the others nodded. they stayed. Still, the pressure didn't stop. Within days, subpoenas arrived. Caleb's financials were frozen for review. Meredith Holloway, Leonard's former investigator, returned to help. "We have a problem," she said, pacing in the office. "How big?" Caleb asked. "Richard Whitmore has hired an aggressive firm. They're building a narrative, one where you targeted Leonard, exploited him." "That's not true." "I know that, but you're an ex-con, and Leonard had no other family in his final days. You were close. You were alone with him. It's easy to twist." Caleb clenched his jaw. "So what now?" She handed him a folder. "We fight. I'll represent the estate. But you'll need to testify. Everything, the letters, the time you spent with Leonard, it all comes out." "Fine." She gave him a look. "No, I mean everything, Caleb. Your arrest, your daughter, every detail." He met her eyes. "Good. I've got nothing to hide." On the eve of the first hearing, Caleb sat outside under the apple tree he and Emma had planted. The branches were bare now, but buds were starting to form. Hope, waiting for spring. Leonard's voice echoed in his mind. "Don't start wearing a mask now." He took out the last letter Leonard had left him, one Meredith had found tucked between the pages of an old psychology book in the house. It read, "If the world comes knocking, don't shrink. Speak truth. Even when your voice shakes. You're not just carrying my memory, Caleb. You're proving something to a world that's forgotten what dignity looks like." He folded it carefully and placed it inside his jacket. Tomorrow, he would walk into court, not as a garbage man, not as an ex-con, not even as the heir to a fortune, but as a man who showed up over and over without expecting anything in return. And now he would fight not to keep what he had, but to honor who gave it. The courtroom smelled like cold wood and nerves. Caleb sat at the front of the room in a pressed shirt and an old jacket that didn't quite fit his shoulders. Beside him, Meredith Holloway reviewed notes, her fingers steady, her face unreadable. Across the aisle, Richard Whitmore, mid-50s, manicured, smug, adjusted his cufflinks like he was walking into a business deal instead of a family betrayal. Behind them, a modest audience gathered, press, curious onlookers, a few Whitmore House residents, and Emma, who sat 2 rows back, her chin held high and arms crossed tightly against her chest. The bailiff called the room to order. The judge, an older woman with sharp eyes and a reputation for cutting through theatrics, entered and took her seat. "Let's proceed," she said. The lawyers went first. Statements, objections, exhibits. Most of it Caleb barely heard. He was too busy watching Richard. The man hadn't shown up when Leonard was in the hospital. Not for the holidays, not even for the funeral. And now, suddenly, he wanted to claim everything: the house, the money, the legacy, from behind a polished smile and a $30,000 suit. "Your Honor," Richard's lawyer began, standing with a stack of documents, "we intend to prove that Mr. Caleb Foster, a convicted felon with no familial relation to the deceased, ingratiated himself into Mr. Whitmore's life under false pretenses. He saw a vulnerable old man and manipulated him for personal gain." He paused for effect, then added, "We will demonstrate, through witnesses and behavioral records, that Mr. Foster used emotional pressure, isolation, and deception to coerce Mr. Whitmore into rewriting his will." Caleb's fists clenched under the table. Meredith whispered, "Stay calm." Then they brought in the witnesses. First, a former colleague of Richard's, a financial consultant who claimed Leonard had once spoken about possibly reconnecting with family. Then a distant neighbor who said she noticed a lot of visits from Caleb and worried about how close they were. "She's never even spoken to Leonard," Caleb muttered. Next came the photos. Grainy shots of Caleb entering and exiting the house, taken over months, maybe longer. One showed him hugging Leonard on the porch. Another, inside the backyard fixing the fence. Richard's lawyer circled the image with a red marker and looked directly at the judge. "Is that the role of a garbage man, Your Honor?" Meredith stood before the objection was even fully formed. "Your Honor, we have over 100 pages of documentation. Letters, receipts, volunteer logs, and medical reports that not only validate Mr. Foster's presence, but prove that Mr. Whitmore himself requested it. This was not coercion. It was compassion." The judge raised a hand. "Let's allow Mr. Foster to speak for himself." And just like that, it was time. Caleb stood slowly, walked to the witness box, and swore in. He adjusted the microphone with uncertain hands. The courtroom was silent. Richard stared at him. Cold. Calculated. The judge leaned forward. "Mr. Foster, in your own words, tell us how you met Leonard Whitmore." Caleb looked down for a second, then up. "It started with the trash." A few chuckles rose from the gallery, quickly silenced. "I was working the sanitation route through Queen Anne. Every morning, around 5, Leonard would be on his porch with a cup of coffee. Never asked for anything. Just waited." He paused. "I started pulling his bin for him. Then one day, he spoke. Said I reminded him of someone." More silence. Over the weeks, he told me stories about his wife, his daughter, the war, the silence after loss. I listened, not because I had to, not because I was planning anything, but because no one had ever really talked to me like that before. He glanced at the jury, then at the judge. "I didn't have a plan. I wasn't working an angle. I just kept showing up, because I could." The opposing lawyer stood. "Did you or did you not serve time in prison?" "Yes," Caleb said. "I did. 8 months for assault. Do you believe that made you trustworthy in the eyes of an 84-year-old man?" "No," Caleb said, "but Leonard saw something in me, something I stopped seeing in myself." He reached into his jacket. "I have letters, not from me, from him. He left them all over the house, in books, in drawers, notes to himself, to me. He chose me." He handed the documents to Meredith, who submitted them into evidence. The judge flipped through one. In Leonard's handwriting, "If I go tomorrow, at least I'll have left something behind. Caleb Foster. The only person who ever showed up for me without asking why." The room shifted. Even Richard sat back in his chair. The trial lasted 5 more days. More witnesses came, but this time they were Caleb's. Mrs. Marsh testified. "He fixed the heater in my room the first night I moved in. I didn't ask. He just noticed I was cold." A former nurse from Leonard's hospital came next. He refused to speak to most of us, but he'd light up when Caleb walked in. Even Jorge Vasquez, Caleb's old supervisor, showed up. You want to talk about character? He was never late, never skipped a shift, never made excuses. Piece by piece, the narrative changed. Richard's case began to crumble. His lawyers grew more aggressive. The judge grew more annoyed. Then came the twist. On the final day, Meredith introduced new evidence, a recorded video. Leonard, seated in his old armchair, face tired but voice clear. "I know they'll say I was confused, that I didn't know what I was doing. But I do. I've never been clearer. Caleb didn't take advantage of me. If anything, I took advantage of him, of his time, his heart, his kindness. And if you're watching this, then I'm gone. And Caleb's probably still trying to give it all away." He chuckled in the video, then looked directly into the camera. "Well, don't let him. He's better than he knows." The screen went black. Silence. The judge looked at Richard's legal team. "Do you wish to continue this suit?" A long pause. Then, "No, Your Honor." The gavel fell. Case dismissed. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed. Reporters surged. Caleb stepped outside and was immediately surrounded. "Mr. Foster, any comment? Do you feel vindicated?" He raised a hand, silencing them. "I just want to go home." And he did. That night, back at the house, Emma was waiting on the porch. He sat beside her, both of them watching the sun dip behind the skyline. "I'm proud of you," she said quietly. Caleb nodded. "You know what's funny?" he asked. "Leonard used to say he didn't believe in second chances, said they were too rare." "And what do you think now?" Caleb smiled faintly. "I think he was wrong. Spring came late that year. In Seattle, the cherry blossoms bloomed shyly, uncertain against the lingering chill. But on the quiet street in Queen Anne, the blue house that once seemed to sigh under the weight of time now stood taller, brighter, alive. The front yard was different now. 2 newly planted apple trees framed the walkway, their thin trunks supported by wooden stakes and hope. Beneath them, wildflowers peeked out from the mulch, and a handmade wooden sign welcomed visitors. The Whitmore Home, a place to belong. Inside, life pulsed with quiet grace. Mrs. Marsh ran a poetry circle every Tuesday. Mr. Hanley taught chess to a teen volunteer with ADHD. A retired jazz pianist played old standards in the afternoons, while Emma, now coming every weekend, taught residents how to use iPads and FaceTime. And Caleb? He was no longer just fixing leaky pipes or restocking the pantry. He was the heart of the home. Each morning, he sat in Leonard's old chair by the front window, drinking his coffee, black, no sugar, just like Leonard used to. Sometimes he'd read from the journals Leonard left behind. Sometimes he'd write in his own. Not letters anymore, plans, visions, a second house, maybe in Tacoma, a program for elderly veterans, outreach to people recently released from prison, helping them find purpose through service. The Whitmore Foundation wasn't just a name now, it was a movement. But before anything else moved forward, there was something he needed to do, something that had waited far too long. He stood in front of a headstone, nestled beneath a tall cedar in Evergreen Washley Cemetery. The sky was soft that day, no wind, just the sound of leaves rustling high above. The name on the stone read, Leonard Arthur Whitmore, 1929-2024. He taught dignity by living it. Caleb knelt, placing a folded envelope on the ground. Inside, a handwritten letter. "Leonard, I didn't know what to say, so I kept waiting. But there's no more reason to wait. I fought for what you left me, and I finally believe I didn't just inherit money. I inherited your mission. The house is full now, with people, with stories, with life. I still mess up. I still doubt. But I keep showing up, just like I did on your porch all those mornings. And somehow, every time I do, I feel like you're still there, watching, not judging, just nodding quietly, like you used to. You gave me more than anyone else ever has. Now, I'm trying to do the same. Thank you for everything." Caleb, he stood slowly, brushed his hands on his jeans, and looked up toward the sky. Then he turned and walked back toward the car, where Emma was waiting in the passenger seat, earbuds in, sketching in a notebook. As he started the engine, she looked up. "You good?" she asked. He nodded. "Yeah, I think I finally am." She looked at him a moment longer. "You know," she said, "Mom told me she wants to come by sometime. She asked if she could see the place. Caleb blinked. Really? Emma nodded. She saw the interview last week, the one you did on live TV. He chuckled nervously. I hated every second of it. You didn't sound like it. They pulled away from the curb, back toward Queen Anne, toward home. That evening, as the sun poured gold through the windows of the Whitmore house, Caleb stood alone in the hallway. At the far end, a new plaque had just been installed. Wood, polished, simple, engraved in clean, bold lettering. Men fall too. What defines them is how they get back up. Leonard A. Whitmore. Caleb ran his fingers across the words. Behind him, laughter spilled from the living room. Jazz music floated through the air. A nurse wheeled a smiling resident into the garden. A pot of stew simmered in the kitchen. He closed his eyes for a moment and smiled. Because this wasn't a story about a garbage man who got lucky. It was a story about a man who was broken, who was given nothing but a chance, and who, in the quiet spaces between pain and redemption, built a new life, not for himself, but for everyone who thought theirs was already over. A second chance, multiplied. And it all started with a handshake, a trash bin, and a porch light left on in the dark. Stories like this remind us how powerful simple acts can be, and how unexpected connections can change everything. Now it's your turn. Drop a comment, hit the like button, or subscribe to keep these emotional journeys alive. Your support helps bring the next story to life.